Story 1. The Whispering Room. Room 214. Even saying it now, years later, leaves a strange heaviness in my chest. Every hospital has a room like that. The one staff avoid when they can. The one whispered about in break rooms. At Street. Luke's, that room was 214. It wasn't cursed in any obvious way. No one had died there in some gruesome accident. At least, none I ever heard of. It was just a standard 4-bed patient room. 2 beds on either side, curtains dividing them, a window that looked down over the parking lot. But 214 carried with it a weight, a thickness in the air, like walking into a place you weren't meant to be. The first patient who told me about it was Mrs. Keene. She'd had her gallbladder removed and was recovering well. An older woman with silver curls and a biting wit. I liked her immediately. She didn't scare easy, but one night, after I'd done her vitals, she grabbed my wrist before I could leave. "Don't turn the lights off," she whispered. I thought she was joking. Why not? Her eyes darted to the empty beds around her. Because when it's dark, they come back. Who? I asked, playing along. Her face was pale, serious. The other patients, they sit on the beds. They whisper to each other. Sometimes they argue. Sometimes they just watch. The hairs on my neck rose. I laughed nervously and pulled back one of the curtains to show her the empty space. "No one's here, Mrs. Keene. You're alone tonight." But she only shook her head, her grip tight. "They hide when you come in, but I hear them." I tried to brush it off, but that night, when I passed 214 during rounds, I slowed. My footsteps echoed too loudly in the hall. The room was dark, shadows pooling in the corners, and faintly, so faintly, I thought my mind was playing tricks. I heard it. Whispers. Not one voice, but many. Rising and falling. Conversing. I stepped inside quickly, my shoes squeaking on the floor. The whispers cut off instantly. The silence was worse than the sound. I checked each bed. Empty. I pulled back every curtain. Nothing. I even checked under the beds, like some rookie nurse afraid of monsters. But when I stood in the center of that room, the sense of being watched pressed down on me so hard my knees nearly buckled. I left, trying to breathe normally, and I told myself it was just stress, sleep deprivation, nerves. But then, 2 weeks later, a new patient was put in 214, a young woman named Jessica, recovering from appendectomy complications. I hadn't told her, or anyone else, what Mrs. Keene said. But one night, around 3 a.m., Jessica rang her call light in a panic. When I arrived, she was sitting upright, pale and trembling. "They won't stop whispering," she said. My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" She gestured to the other beds. "There are people in here. I can hear them, talking. But when I look," she pulled back her own curtain, revealing nothing. "They're gone. It's driving me insane." I reassured her, gave her a mild sedative. But when I left the room, my skin crawled. It wasn't just Mrs. Keene. It wasn't just Jessica. Over the years, I heard the same story from half a dozen patients. Always in 214. Always the same. Voices, whispers, unseen figures. One nurse, Maria, told me she refused to take assignments in that room. "I hear them too," she admitted one night in the break room. Her voice was low, almost ashamed. Once, when I went in to check an IV, I heard a man's voice, clear as day, right behind me, say, "Not yet." I turned so fast, I dropped the saline bag. No one was there, but I swear to God, Sarah, it was real. After that, I avoided 214 as much as possible. I did my job, of course, but I never lingered. In and out, quick as I could. But avoidance only works for so long. One night, the unit was short-staffed. I was assigned to cover 214 and 2 other rooms at the far end of the hall. It was around 2:45 a.m., the dead hour. Some call it when I went in to check on Mr. Doyle. the only patient there that night. He was a kind old man with heart problems, polite and soft-spoken. I found him awake, staring at the ceiling. "Can't sleep?" I asked gently. His eyes flicked toward the empty bed across from him. "Too noisy," he murmured. A chill ran through me. "Noisy? They won't stop whispering," he said, almost apologetic. I told them to hush, but they don't listen. My blood ran cold. "Who, Mr. Doyle?" "The others," he said simply, and closed his eyes. I stood frozen for a moment, the air heavy and still. Then, faintly, so faintly, I could have sworn it came from right next to me. I heard it, a whisper. My throat closed. I spun, looking wildly around the room. Empty. Empty beds, curtains still. But the whisper came again, soft and drawn out, like breath against my ear. I bolted. I didn't finish rounds. I didn't chart right away. I fled to the nurse's station, shaking so badly I could barely hold my pen. For the rest of the shift, I avoided 214, unless absolutely necessary. When morning came and the sun spilled through the windows, the dread eased, but it never left. Not completely. 214 wasn't just a patient room anymore. It had become something else. A doorway, a gathering place, a reminder that the hospital's walls were never empty. And deep down, I knew it was only the beginning. Story 2. The storage room entity. The storage room was supposed to be harmless. Every night shift, nurses need somewhere to rest during breaks, and at Street Luke's, the options were limited. There was the staff lounge with its battered couches, the call rooms if they weren't already full, and then the little storage room at the far end of the post-surgical wing. Technically, it wasn't meant for breaks. It was for extra linens, wheelchairs, and the occasional overflow of medical supplies. But someone had shoved an old recliner in there years ago, and since then, it had become the unofficial nap spot. Or at least, it used to be. By the time I started working nights regularly, most nurses refused to go in there. They whispered about bad dreams, about waking up to the sensation of being watched. Some even swore they saw someone standing in the corner while they slept. I didn't believe it at first. Hospitals make people superstitious. Every creak in the walls, every flicker of a light becomes a ghost story. I told myself the same thing I always did. Tired brains invent things. So one night, exhausted after a string of admissions, I decided to prove everyone wrong. The storage room was small, barely large enough to hold the recliner, a narrow shelf of supplies, and the cart of spare linens. The single bulb in the ceiling flickered faintly when I switched it on, throwing long, weak shadows. The air smelled faintly of bleach and dust. I settled into the recliner, pulled a blanket over myself, and closed my eyes. The hum of the building surrounded me, the distant beeping of monitors, the faint roll of a cart down the hall, the soft hiss of the ventilation system, familiar sounds, safe sounds. I must have dozed off quickly, because the next thing I remember is opening my eyes in total darkness. The bulb had gone out. I blinked, disoriented, my heart already beginning to pound. I reached for the pull chain. It didn't work. That was when I felt it. The sense of someone in the room with me. At first, it was just a heaviness in the air, that charged sensation you get when another person enters your space. Then it grew, pressing, watching. My eyes adjusted slowly, and there, in the far corner of the room, I saw it. A shape. Human, standing perfectly still. I froze, every muscle locked. My breathing turned shallow. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything, but I couldn't move. Sleep paralysis, I told myself desperately. It has to be sleep paralysis. But it didn't feel like sleep paralysis. My eyes were open, darting frantically around the room, and every nerve in my body screamed that I was awake. The figure didn't move at first. It just stood there, a darker shadow against the dim light leaking in from the hallway crack under the door. I couldn't make out a face, just the outline of shoulders, a head, long arms hanging unnaturally low. Then it shifted. A single step forward. I tried to move, to sit up, but I was rooted to the recliner, muscles unresponsive. My heart hammered painfully in my chest. Another step. It was closer now. The air felt colder, heavier, like the oxygen itself was being drained from the room. The figure bent at the waist, leaning closer and closer until I swore I could feel its breath on my face. And then it vanished. Not walked away, not dissolved, just blinked out of existence. I gasped, my body suddenly free, and bolted upright. The light flickered back on overhead, as if nothing had happened. But my blanket was pulled halfway to the floor, and I was drenched in sweat. I stumbled out of the room, shaking, too rattled to return. When I told the others later, they only gave me knowing looks. "That's why we don't sleep in there," Maria said flatly. I laughed weakly, trying to brush it off, but inside I was rattled to the core. Because whatever had been in that room with me, it hadn't been a dream. I refused to nap in the storage room again. But that wasn't the end of it. A few nights later, I passed by the door on my way to grab linens. The bulb inside was flickering again, dim light spilling into the hall. For just a second, I glanced through the small rectangular window, and I saw it. The figure, standing in the corner, exactly where it had been before. Only this time, it was smiling. Not a normal smile. Too wide, too stretched, teeth too sharp. I staggered back, nearly dropping the chart I was carrying. When I forced myself to look again, heart hammering, breath ragged, the room was empty. The recliner sat untouched, the shelves neat, no figure. But the smile lingered in my mind, long after. After that, I avoided the storage room entirely. I'd rather walk across the entire hospital for supplies than open that door again. Some things don't want to be disturbed, and whatever lived in that room was one of them.